Today on the debate show, we have Kevin Hickey, an attorney out of Arkansas. So, Kevin, first off, everybody's going to notice Joni's not with us. She's out running an errand and everything, so she's kind of running behind. So, let's get straight down to it. We're going to talk about the legalities that play in family courts. Now, we understand that you're in Arkansas, and it may vary from different states and everything. But what is the primary purpose of family courts in your professional opinion?
Well, back in the day, decades ago, a judge would hear um, every kind of matter, criminal, domestic relations, civil litigation, everything would fall under one particular judge. And some jurisdictions still do that to an extent. But a lot of jurisdictions started dividing out these responsibilities so that a judge could handle a particular type of matter all the time. And that's kind of, you've got criminal courts and civil courts, and then you've got family court. And so I think one of the reasons was because a judge might get used to a certain type of law and understand and deal with a lot of cases that dealt with the same kind of laws over and over. And they thought, well, it'd be a good idea if someone is doing a lot, if a judge is doing a lot of family law stuff, then we probably ought to start giving him more family law cases since he's more familiar with than other judges with that kind of law. That's one of the main reasons I think is because that way you could have a judge that's very knowledgeable about family law and could handle those matters.
Okay. So, what section of judiciary do family courts actually come under? We hear a lot of times, and in my research, they mostly come under what a kind of a probate court, basically.
Well, every state's different. Some are probates usually will deal with like guardianships and that kind of thing. And then obviously when someone's died, they'll probate wills and things like that. In Arkansas, we have a probate division for those kinds of matters. And then we have a domestic relations division, and that is what would commonly be called a family court. So all they handle are domestic relations issues,
Now,
divorce, custody, visitation, those kinds of issues.
it's funny that you use the term domestic relations because it's one of the things that when I started researching this back in 2017 is that the term family court is kind of a made up term. Most courts throughout the country are called domestic relations courts. That's why on paperwork it's DC. So, where does the term family court come from in the majority of these?
Well, I think it probably comes from the phrase family law. A lot of people, years and years ago, the phrase family lawyer started being thrown around, and people that were getting divorced or had a custody issue or something like that would say, "Well, you need to get a family law lawyer." And it just, I think because it deals with families, marriages, children, overall family issues, I think it just kind of, that's where it came from. I practice in different states, and I can't remember the last time I was in a court that was called a family law court. It's usually domestic relations or something like that.
Yeah, because I started referring to family court as a marketing tool, nomenclature to make people feel comfortable. Because this is, I mean, let's be real, family courts or domestic relations courts are not the happiest place courts on earth.
No, they're not. And I don't, as soon as I say it, I'll probably be wrong, but I don't think on our website and in different places where I'm on social media, I don't think you'll see the word family lawyer. You might, because that's something we used a long time ago. Because I think it's a little misleading too. I think some people think, oh, we need a family lawyer, and they think that covers everything, having wills done, adoptions, and all that. And so they want all kinds of matters to fall under that heading. And that's not a lot of what I do. I will do adoptions here and there, but the bulk of what I do is divorce and then high conflict custody cases. And that's what generally falls under what you call family law, but it doesn't feel very familial when you're in those kinds of cases.
Now, let me ask you this because we get, you know, how do you feel about courts dealing with the issue of parental alienation?
Well, I mean, I have been dealing with, in my cases, parental alienation for years, just like a lot of attorneys that have been doing this for very long. You're going to start coming up against that. And it's all over the map. I see articles from all over the country, and we'll hear different attorneys, even in Arkansas, talk about, and clients that come in and say, well, I know there's no parental alienation in Arkansas. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? They just assume that judges in Arkansas will not recognize it, and that's just not true. I mean, I can name off the top of my head several judges that have used that exact phrase in cases I've had. They've cited it in their order. It's gone all the way up to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals has mentioned it. So it's alive and well in Arkansas as a legal issue you have to deal with. Other states, I've had attorneys say, "Oh, we don't use that phrase. We don't use that phrase parental alienation because the judges don't like it, or they say they don't want to hear it." And I've had other people say it doesn't exist. And you know, my position is I'm going to do, because I take cases in different states as well, and so I kind of read the room, so to speak, whenever I'm in another state or even in Arkansas, which judge I'm in front of. My position is I don't have to have those words, parental alienation, if I can get the behaviors in to evidence that I'm looking for, because that's the key. Every judge will recognize those behaviors, and if a parent is doing that to the other parent, whatever label you put on it, it's not right. And it's not supposed to be going on. So if I can get those behaviors across, and judge, you don't like the words parental alienation, that's fine with me as long as you'll see these behaviors and understand they're wrong and do whatever's needed to remedy that.
Yeah, because I mean, we kind of get into that debate a lot on the show and other outlets that we do, that the term parental alienation seems to be the battleground, just the term, not the actual actions of it. But you know, like you said, you got to learn the landscape in front of these judges. Some may use the term and some may not. It's gone from parental alienation, custodial interference, all throughout the thing. So, as an attorney, how do you recommend other attorneys to combat parental alienation in a courtroom?
You mean, or to handle that issue, how to present that issue?
Yeah, if it comes up that they're being accused, or how to defend against parental alienation.
I think uh, you've got to again read the room and figure out what your judge is about. If you've not been in front of that judge before, you may want to try to talk to other attorneys that have, because every judge kind of has their trigger of things that they don't like to hear or whatever. And so you've got to figure out how you're going to approach it. And again, I I tread lightly with the phrase parental alienation unless I'm in front of a judge that I know has no problem quoting that and is going to know exactly what it is. I usually start off in my presentations with the behavior anyway. I have my client on the stand testifying about what's been done to them. What is the other parent doing to you that is causing this divide between you and your child? And we start going down that road, and the judge gets the sense of what's going on anyway. Um, and I want to go back to something you said there at the beginning. You're right. It's turning into this big argument or tug of war over whether we're going to use the phrase parental alienation or not. And I just got an expert on a case recently, and they said, well, I don't really use that phrase parental alienation. And it's like, well, okay, I guess that's fine. But we've got to label it something because it's going on. And I I feel like, to me it's a little bit of a waste of time to argue over this phrasing. Now, one phrase that I think has really come into disfavor and isn't used much anymore, and that I don't use anymore. Originally you'd hear about parental alienation syndrome. They called it a syndrome. And I read up a lot of articles about that. And uh, you know, in mental health and just general health and all, overall, you have to for something to be a syndrome, there's guidelines that it has to fall under to be called a syndrome. And when I read it and saw what those guidelines were, I thought, I don't know that parental alienation really falls under that either. So I think parental alienation.
About that, I lost signal there for a second.
Yeah, I saw you kind of cutting in and out there.
Yeah, I'm in North Carolina, and even our cell phones around here have been acting weird the last couple of days.
I
Uh,
understand.
but yeah, I just got a message from Joni. She's like, "Do it without me. Get it started." I'm like, "Okay." But yeah, I mean, so
I don't know how much of that you
let
caught
me
there
ask
at
you
the
this. I'm
end.
just going to be straight.
Yeah.
It probably still recorded because it came right back in recording.
Okay.
So let me ask you this straight out, and I'm a very blunt journalist and everything. Do you feel that the judicial system is well educated on the subject of parental alienation?
Um, that's a very broad, you're putting an umbrella over to me, all of the judges in the country. And again, it's judge by judge. There are some judges that
Okay,
are on
let's
top
narrow
of
it
it.
down. Let's narrow it down to your experience. Let's narrow it down to your experience.
Um, I think I'd answer it this way. I think the majority, if they've been doing it for very long, they see those behaviors, whether they associate that with the phrase parental alienation or have heard the phrase parental alienation. It's probably the majority have not. And they certainly don't know all of the ramifications from alienation. You really have to go through and show them, okay, judge, yeah, this parent is acting this way and this needs to stop, but let us show you what the effect this is having on the child, not just my client and the child's relationship, but how it harms the child. The child, one of the things that some of my favorite judges will say to parents is you need to stop trashing the other parent in front of the child because that child is half you and half the other parent. And the child is going to associate, well, then half of me is bad. There are effects on the child in addition to effects on the other parent and the relationship with the child. So, judges, I don't know that they always catch on to the full ramifications of how deep this problem goes. And so we either will use an expert or we will use other evidence to show counselors or whatever to show, look, judge, I need to tell you how this is really affecting this child too.
There are a lot of critics out there, parental alienation, pro shared parenting, anti shared parenting, anti parental alienation. The basic facts, and let me know if you agree with this, is that the focus, and it's the motto of domestic relations court, is best interest of a child. Are these courts actually paying attention to the best interest of a child when it comes to this sort of subject matter?
I think they make a good attempt, and I think a lot of judges get it, and they get it right. That is the poll star, best interest of the child. Everything varies by state, but that's the poll star that's pretty much in every state in the country. And uh, there are flaws in the system. There's no doubt about that. And there are some judges that um, are, don't really weigh all the factors. I mean, judges are people too, and there are excellent judges that are on top of everything, and some that not so much. And that's something you have to watch for with every case that you've got.
Do you see a shift in cases that you handle in courtrooms you go into where the older judges are leaving and the newer judges are coming in, the younger crowd is basically taking over? Do you see a difference in the mentality when it comes to that subject matter?
A little bit. I think if you have judges that are older, because joint custody has just become the norm the last 15 to 20 years across the country, and some states, Arkansas, just enacted joint custody as a rebuttable presumption just like 3 years ago. So 50-50 time. So I think a lot of the older judges it's hard to, it's can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think they have that older mindset that the mother is usually the more appropriate caretaker, and it goes all the way back to when it was primarily men that were the breadwinners, and of course, decades ago that started to shift, and women are just as much in the workforce now as men, and so it was, but I think a lot of judges still have that older mindset that the mom is going to immediately be a better nurturer and caretaker than the dad, and that's just not always the case. And there's a lot of research on that. But yeah, I think the newer generation, I think, is more accustomed to joint custody. They've heard it more during, when they went to law school, became attorneys, and before they became judges. So I think they're a little more adept at understanding that, and also understanding the problems that can occur when one parent is alienating.
So let me ask you this. Why do you feel as an attorney feel that, or give me your opinion on this better. Let me rephrase this. Give me your opinion on this as a professional attorney. Why do you feel there are certain attorneys out there, and probably all throughout the country, but we're going to stick with Arkansas here, that are that just say parental alienation doesn't happen?
That's a real good question. Uh, I don't understand it because I've been doing this a long time, and I've studied all the top experts in the country on alienation. And there is so much research out there and so much evidence out there of alienation going on. I don't understand that. And the only rationale I can put to it is if I sat down with someone, that an attorney that says that doesn't exist, and I start asking questions, what I would do is say, well, have you noticed this in your practice in the divorces and custody cases you've had? Have you noticed this? Have you noticed it? And if they're answering yes to all of that, then I would say, well, to me, all of that is alienation. So if you're seeing all those things, then alienation is going on, or you've got to have some other kind of word for it. I mean, even if it's a phrase that goes all the way down to, well, that's just bad behavior by the other parent, it needs to stop. You're identifying it, you're just not putting that parental alienation label on it.
Now,
Because they
here's a
have to be
question. Me and
seeing
Joni
it. If
kind
you
of
do
got into
much
this.
domestic relations at all, you have to be seeing it because this stuff was going on as soon as I started my career 26 years ago. It was already going on. So it's been there for a long time. Parents, bad actors, parents doing these kinds of things. So if you've done much domestic relations at all, you've seen it. You, for some reason, you just don't want to. Some attorneys, you're right, they don't want to put that phrase on it.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because me and Joni kind of got into this in our last episode. Most states have some sort of um law on the books pertaining to mental abuse of a child. And one of the big issues is that, I guess, parental alienation, or the actions of parental alienation, are considered mental abuse on children. So why are these sort of cases not passed over to a criminal court at that point?
Well, I think the primary reason is it would have to fall under some kind of crime. And I know what you're saying. It's like, well, abuse would fall under it. Prosecutors are, they hate getting involved in domestic situations. They say that's a domestic matter. You need to go get an attorney and go to the domestic court. Um, if it got to such a point, I guess it could. And there are laws on the books that are not necessarily abuse, but that do identify if one parent is interfering with the visitation or custody of the other parent, that is a crime. And it's usually a misdemeanor in Arkansas. In Arkansas, if you go over state lines with the child and you violate that statute, it's a felony. I mean, so there are, but good luck getting a prosecutor to prosecute something like that. They just don't like getting involved in domestic matters.
Is it because the most courts feel like it's a he said, she said sort of routine?
They do, and I think they don't know if it's all been mental and emotional abuse. That's hard to prove damage from that, hard to prove a crime was committed. A lot of it's he said, she said. You know, the child comes back to the other parent and says, "Let me tell you what mom did to me." Dad goes and reports it. Mom denies it. And now you've got, like you said, this he said, she said situation. And the prosecutors are like, well, we're never going to get beyond a reasonable doubt in a case on that. So we're not going to file it to begin with. So I think that is a lot of the issue. And you also
So
have, one court we haven't talked about, you have juvenile courts, DHS, CPS, and all that. And I think a lot of prosecutors defer to those agencies to step in, and that's a whole other can of worms, but to step in situations if there might be abuse going on. So I think a lot of prosecutors feel like there are other mechanisms in the law other than them having to charge someone with a crime. Now, obviously, if there's physical abuse or something like that, they're going to get arrested. I mean, that's going to happen. But these other areas of alienation that get kind of nebulous, prosecutors a lot of times just don't want to get involved.
I'm glad you brought that up because with juvenile courts, because now I'm specialized in South Carolina and everything. Um, but South Carolina does not have a juvenile. They have family court, typical court system and everything, but they do not have a juvenile court. And a lot of states do, and they pass, like you said, they pass these cases over the juvenile courts. So, what is the difference between a juvenile court and what they can handle compared to a domestic relations court?
Juvenile courts, I'll just use Arkansas as an example, and I think most states are kind of this way. If usually something has happened with one or both of the parents, they've either been arrested for drugs or something, or neglect of a child or whatever, and the state has a duty to step in and protect that child, even if it's from their own parents. So that's what juvenile courts are designed to do, to protect children from situations where their parents have gone off the rails for some reason with drugs or whatever, been arrested for crimes or whatever else it may be. And so a juvenile court will step in. A lot of times will take the child out of the situation and put them temporarily or longer in a foster home or with a relative. And I use the phrase until the parents can get their act together. And that could be a month, 2 months, that could be a year or longer. And the juvenile courts will have caseworkers assigned, social workers assigned, and they will work with the parents during that time. You have review hearings during that time, and the whole goal is to try to get this child or these children back with their parents. Uh, Family law is, and domestic courts are more usually we're going to one hearing and we're going to decide custody, and that's it. Juvenile courts are designed to try to give the family services and ultimately get the child or the children back with their parents.
Okay.
And that's when something severe has happened. That's when juvenile courts will step in.
Okay, so that brings up a whole different aspect. That's one of the reasons why I love these shows that me and Joni have been doing is because it's basically a conversation between professionals and parents and stuff, and you get so much more concept out of it. So let me ask you this: in a lot of cases, we're seeing more social services being accused of parental alienation for whatever reasons that are involved in the case. Is that something that you are experiencing in Arkansas as well? That social services is being accused more of this?
I usually see parental alienation as something intentional. It's usually the other parent using tactics to alienate. Um, our using Arkansas as an example, our social services and the juvenile courts, and not so much courts, judges, but the caseworker and the social workers, are they interfering a lot of times with the relationship between the parent and the child? Absolutely. Uh, a lot of times they have to provide the transportation. I have clients complain all the time. I'm supposed to get 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock on Monday. Social services arranges for the transport. And I'll get a call and say, I just want to let you know for the last 3 weeks, I haven't had my visitation. I've been there and they've called and said, well, we don't have transportation. Well, what's a parent supposed to do about that? It's not their fault, you know. And it's really bad when they've been complying with everything they're supposed to be complying with, and they're almost done with their case or getting close, and they've gotten their act back together, and social services is just not doing what they're supposed to be doing to get the child there for a visitation. And so I am seeing a lot of that, and I do see caseworkers that get very biased against a parent. They don't like them or whatever. They get it, it's almost personal. And I feel like sometimes they have used the power that they have to keep a child away. So, yeah, I see those things
Okay.
intentionally and unintentionally.
Yeah, because we're seeing more and more reports on social services doing the like what you were saying, no transportation, rescheduling visits, and it's the same thing you hear on the private side, and all of a sudden it's PA, parental
Right.
alienation on there. But when it's social services, they don't allow that term to enter the courtroom most of the times. It's they're doing their job as they can.
Well, I think
Uh,
sometimes caseworkers, this is sometimes, there's always bad apples that make the whole thing look bad, but then there's a lot of problems with the juvenile system that needs to be fixed. But I think sometimes you get a caseworker that gets on a little bit of a power trip, and they feel like I control everything at this point, and they use that in a bad way, and it's terrible for the parents because there's not, I mean, they're going against the state. They're going against the entire state when they're doing that. And it's just, they feel like there's a very much an imbalance of power. And so I represent a lot of people in juvenile court and usually parents. And one reason they hire me is because they want to feel like they're getting put on a level playing field. They will come to me midway through their case and they're like, "Look, they told me early on I didn't need a lawyer. Now I feel like I'm just getting run over all the time every time I go to court, and I need some help." So they want us to be there to make sure the state's doing what they're supposed to be doing, following the case plan that's been put together, and that they're going to get their kids back.
okay, we got Joni back. So hey, Joni,
Hey, do me a favor, unmute my me because I can't do it on the phone. Drive well because it's got me in
you're
safe
you
mode.
are you are unmuted.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can hear you
Okay, wonderful. Yes,
and
I don't
see
know if you can.
you.
Oh,
It looks like
perfect.
you're flying around the Aurora Borealis there. That's
Yeah,
great.
I like that too. So, Kevin, I'm so sorry I was late today. Just calamity of things.
That's
At
okay.
any rate, um, I'm so glad you're on the show. You've really brought up some great issues and points, and I'm just going to let you guys go at it.
Okay.
So Kevin, let me ask you this because I'm a huge TikToker. I love watching my TikTok videos, and I see every once in a while where I see law enforcement coming to collect kids with no paperwork, no nothing, just on a social worker say so, basically. What are the legalities in a courtroom for this sort of action?
Well, the state has very broad powers to get a child out of a situation if they feel like they need to. Now, I could give you 100 examples of what falls under that and what doesn't. It's a very vague definition to me. If you're saying a child's in harm, well, that can mean a thousand different things. And I've seen it, and this is, in the particular county that I'm in Arkansas, a few years ago, the state did a study and said, you have your county, those two or three counties there, you have tons of kids in foster care compared to everyone else in the state. And I had a caseworker ask me one time, "What do you think we should do? What would be your solution to that?" I said, "Well, my solution to it is that you need to stop getting kids out of the home. You guys will, there's to me, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I will see a situation going on and will be shocked that the state did not take the child out of that home. And then I'll see another situation where I'm like, that happens every day in every home in the state. Why? And they pull the kids out. That's one thing, is there doesn't seem to be a good rule of thumb of when to get involved. And so you start running into, and I won't can't get into too much constitutional stuff, but there's a little
Yeah.
bit of a due process there situation. And a lot of times you've got caseworkers that take the kids out. Sometimes you'll have the police officers that take them out. Um, I, it just seems to be a real gray area. And then you're dealing with timing. If you've gone out at 1 a.m. and found a meth lab in a home, you're going to have to try to find a caseworker at that point. The cops don't know what to do, and there's two or three young kids in this house. I mean, it's a tough situation to know what to do.
So let me get back to this because it just popped in my head as you were speaking. Was if let's just create a scenario here where I, as a parent, have parenting time with my children, and all of a sudden the ex-wife, the ex-girlfriend, whoever shows up and demands the kids, and I call law enforcement. What is supposed is let's what's supposed to play out there, and what usually plays out there is that law enforcement will say, we don't get involved, you got to go to court. Unless the one party's acting out, then they'll get involved usually. But what
Well,
is the
you
actual process of something like that? I mean, what duties do law enforcement have in cases like this?
it's and I tell clients this. It depends on which officer comes out. It total X factor. You never know. Some will say, and this is what I would prefer, to be honest, it happens most of the time. Some will say, do you have your custody order? Let's look at it and see who's supposed to have the child today, what time, what are you supposed to be doing? You've got both parties there. You've got a peace officer there in the form of a policeman. Let him on the spot kind of see what it is and interpret what needs to happen. And some will do that. And 9 times out of 10, they just look at the order and say, well, ma'am, it's not your time, or sir, it's not your time, or whatever, and here's what needs to happen. And then the situation's kind of diffused. A lot of times, though, police officers will say, oh, that's a domestic situation. I can't get involved in that, just like you just said. And they'll leave, and then someone's filing for contempt or doing something else or whatever. And so I would prefer, and I don't know that there is I think your question is what's supposed to happen. To me, what I said to start with is what should happen. But a lot of officers don't see it that way.
Okay. Because I mean, we get parents on the show all the time, and these situations, they tell us about them, and it's like, and I agree. I don't think there is a set policy for law enforcement's interaction in these sort of matters, because it's all situational. Uh,
Right.
I mean, to try to come up with one policy to cover the whole thing would be, like creating another planet.
Mhm.
Uh, but let me ask you this, because this is kind of the way I wanted to go with this question was when law enforcement does get involved, and like you said, one parent has their custody order and everything, and they determine that the child is probably better off with the mom, and then that parent who had the children goes after the officer. What recourses could they do actually? Because he was doing it in the service of his duty, which he, with his own opinion, this goes back to there is no set policy of he's using his own personal best opinion at the time to make that decision.
You mean that there's been allegations against whoever has
Yeah,
the child?
yeah.
Well, I don't know that they're supposed to do that. They're not supposed to make a call like that just on the fly, of taking a child. Now instead of interpreting an order, now you're becoming judge and jury on the spot and saying, here's what needs to happen, and I'm taking the child away from you. Usually in Arkansas, that's when DHS, Department of Human Services, that's who oversees our juvenile situations, juvenile court, will step in at that point and will file something, or they have authority to come in and say, we're taking this child and we're going to set this for an immediate hearing. The statute says there's supposed to be a hearing within 72 hours in a situation like that. If a caseworker has come out and feels like it's that bad of a situation, they have to do something on the spot.
Yeah, I think the 72 hours is kind of across the board from other people
Yeah.
I've spoken to in other states. I know it is in
Yes,
South Carolina.
it should be really quick and fast like that, but what we're finding is it's months. I mean, and the increase in false allegations has kind of really gotten out of control. And everybody, will claim, oh, I'm just protecting the kid. It's so ridiculous with the I'm just protecting the kid when there isn't even a viable
Mhm.
grounds, if you will, for what's going on.
Yeah,
It's
the false allegations are a huge. We hadn't even talked about that, but that's another
Yeah.
that falls under parental alienation. That is a big part of what we're having to fight. We've been married 22 years and never saw any problems at all, but now all of a sudden dad's a pedophile. And that has uh, rose up so much in the last 20 years. I thought it would start to dissipate, but it's actually, to me, I think it's gotten worse.
it has
It's
gotten worse.
increased. I think the name for that is silver bullet tactics.
Yes, yes.
Um, which that's one of
And
the
it
first
has
things when I started researching. It's one of the first terms I came up with. I'm like, what's the silver bullet? Are we dealing with werewolves here?
Right.
And then I started reading and I'm like, oh, okay. So it's creating false narrative and false evidence to separate, whatever outcome you want.
Well, when you're representing the parent that has been accused, you are behind the eight ball from the very beginning, and you are now trying to prove a negative for the rest of the case. We talked a while ago about judges and how up on alienation are they and catching on. Uh, Judges, to me, it depends on who you have, but judges that have done much of this kind of work, they've caught on to it too. And they have seen it before too. And I've had more than one judge in the last few years, and I've been very happy about this. Say a lot of times it seems to be the mother that makes the allegations. I'll just use that as an example. They'll say, "Ma'am, if this stuff turns out to be true, I absolutely guarantee you that your kids are going to be kept safe, and
Recording in progress.
we're going to do what we need to do. But if it turns out this is false, and I found out that you encouraged this, coached this, anything else, you're losing custody of your kids." And I've had judges say that at the very beginning of a case before. And I'm very thankful of that, because that to me means they're really going to make sure that this really happened before, before they hold that parent accountable.
Now, how many judges in your experience that have actually said that have actually followed through with that?
They have,
Okay.
or we get to the point where they have a lot of suspicions about that other parent. May not go all the way of taking custody away, but they certainly will do joint custody or not hold it against the parent that had accusations brought against them. Now, if
Okay.
it shows it was absolutely false and the mother or whoever that parent was involved in actively perpetrating that, then yeah, they will. They
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, because most of the people we hear from, like California, South Carolina, Connecticut, they don't play that in their court system. Which, in common sense, in other countries they do this. If you bring up false
Mhm.
allegations, guess what? You're going to pay the price. Uh, let
Well,
me
it's
ask you.
proven they're false too. I mean,
Yeah.
what do well, that's what I'm just repeating what my daughter told me. Well, what do you do with that? That's what they'd say 9 times out of 10 is, well, I'm just repeating what my daughter told me. I didn't make that up. Of course, I'm the parent. I'm trying to protect her. So I took her to whoever to be interviewed. And so it's hard to fight that and really prove either coaching or something along those lines.
Let me ask you this. Do you think the domestic relations courts would be better off removing the preponderance of the evidence rule and coming in with a clear and convincing rule? Would that
Uh,
would that remove a lot of the he said, she said, false allegation stuff?
so you mean if someone's bringing up allegations, they have to prove those by clear and convincing
Yeah,
evidence?
yeah.
It might. That's not a bad idea. I can tell you that I told you Arkansas just 3 years ago came up with the joint custody 50-50. That is the presumption as of 3 years ago for judges. They start with that unless that presumption is rebutted and it's by clear and convincing evidence that there's been domestic abuse or something like that. And that's a higher burden. And I can tell you that has, um, uh, I don't know what the word would be, but there have not been as many custody fights over that situation, and I think part of it is because of that higher burden. So yeah, that may be something that would be helpful.
Because a lot of parents and even some professionals we talk to have down the preponderance of the evidence rule so badly because it allows so much, not that just allegations in without proof, and judges will sometimes go with what they get in their lap. um,
We
so I
also
wanted to
have,
get your opinion on that.
I mean, we
Well,
also have,
oh, go ahead, Joni.
I'm sorry, we also have the problem that some judges don't even get that right, even when there is clear and convincing evidence. We've had that happen with one or two judges here in Connecticut, and it turned out that the parent was right that there was a problem.
Mhm.
And it happens. And part of it's a lack of proper training too.
Well, I
It
think
is.
I think it's like what Kevin said earlier, was that it's going to be very judge, specific as to what their education background, what their experience is. So you're not getting necessarily bad judges. You're just getting lack of experience, lack of education in an aspect. But
Mhm.
that's with everybody involved in family courts. There's always going to be some aspect that they're not well educated on. I'm not defending anybody, but let's look at reality on it.
And then you
Uh,
get to and then you have the issue of we have a specific training we know needs to be imparted to these people. But then you have the people that bash the whole concept of custodial interference and the ability to alienate. And now, how do we even get proper training into them because it's being combated against?
Well, we were talking earlier before you got on, Joni, about how I handle with different cases and different judges, kind of trying to feel them out, what their knowledge level is. There's different questions you can ask and things like that. But one thing I always make sure I get out there in a case like what we've been talking about is I'll ask one of the witnesses at some point, well, are you aware that over 80% of the false allegations that are made in the country come out of a custody case, come out of an acrimonious situation, and they're rife with that. And so that I want that number in that judge's mind that, oh, there's a very, very good chance that what I'm listening to is totally false. Never happened.
Love it.
so
Thank you for repeating that for me. Thank you.
this is a subject we really don't touch much on, but since we have you here, Kevin, um, let's talk a little bit about how judges give out child support, because we were talking about the atomic family earlier. That has been gone for the last 20 years. The mom doesn't stay at home necessarily. The mom works, the dad works and stuff. Um, has in Arkansas, and I'll keep this specific to Arkansas. Have you seen a shift in the amounts of child support that's being ordered, or is it still going by that old model?
No, I've seen a shift, and we had I don't know if you'd use a task. Whenever I think of task force, I think of trying to find a murderer or something. But they had a task force on child support about 3 or 4 years ago, and they revamped our entire child support system. So we have a chart, a child support chart that we use, and we have two now, whereas before we only had one. We have a joint custody one when the parents are splitting time 50-50, and then we have one where one parent has full custody and the other parent is only getting about 30% of the time. And it's based on both of their incomes. You look at that, and don't ask me to explain the formula, but they look at how much time each parent has the kids and that kind of thing, and incomes, and what are approximate daily living expenses, and then it spits out this number. And obviously, if you're on the joint custody chart 50-50, if you're the higher earner, your child support is still going to be much, much less because you're basically splitting time. And a lot of times, when we enter into agreements on 50-50 time, we waive child support altogether because both parents are equally sharing, presumably, in the expenses of the children because they each have them half the time.
The
Yeah.
only problem I have with basing child support on how much time a parent has with the child is that made a major increase in false allegations because they knew if they filed false allegations and they got more custody and more time, that they would get more money.
It happens. It does
And
happen.
it's, yep,
But now that we have this joint custody law in Arkansas, I can explain and I will get a sense in a consultation if I have a client going down that road, Joni, And I will explain, you need to understand, we can't just say, I don't think he's been as involved as I've been through the years. You've got to show abuse or really major stuff to get over that clear and convincing standard. So you want to go down that road, you better be coming up with some evidence. I mean, there's got to be something there. And yeah, if false allegations start, then that's just a bad road to go down. Now you're risking yourself losing custody.
That's if you, the problem also coming in with that we see is somebody makes allegation after allegation after allegation. And finally, DCF, Child Protective Services, which is another one of my pet peeves. Why can't we just have the same name for the organization for around the country, please?
Oh yeah, yeah. We don't even have
Uh,
CPS in Arkansas. It's DHS.
See, we have something else in Connecticut, New Jersey is something else, New York is okay. Back to the point that we end up. I just lost my train of thought. Dummy me.
Well, that's my fault.
Oh,
That's just Joni on average day.
me.
Yeah, I interrupted her.
Uh,
So
at
let me
any rate,
go ahead, Joni.
the point, I guess the point is that there is a problem with this child support system, and then the false allegations being allowed, and we're back to square one of, well, this is a way to get more time, to get more money out of somebody.
Yeah.
Well, let me get this question, Kevin, because we're talking about parental alienation in the judicial system, and now we brought up the child support aspect. How do the courts deal with, if a parent can't pay child support and they're incarcerated and they don't get their visiting time that they're court ordered and all this stuff? Isn't that in some way, shape, or form a form of parental alienation?
Uh, you mean because they're in jail?
Yeah, because they couldn't pay their child support or something along those lines. I mean, if
Oh,
they
they've
did
been put
something,
in jail for non-payment.
yeah, and then they don't get their visitation and stuff like this, and they're distancing. I mean, a lot of parents view it that the court system is distancing them from their children by doing
Well,
this incarceration aspect.
well, in Arkansas, you've got to really, um, you've got to be way, way behind on your child support. The child support enforcement agencies here, I think we have certainly locally where I am, I think we have some very good attorneys that work there, and they will give a paying parent chance after chance after chance. If they've lost their job or whatever, they'll lower it down to minimum wage, whatever child support. I mean, you've got to do a lot to end up in prison for a long time if you're
It's a
for not
shame it
paying
isn't
child support.
like that around the rest of the country because
Yeah.
we know that a lot of judges will say, well, you used to make that, so I'm going to consider that your salary, even though that's not what you're making now. I think you've got the potential. As we age, our potential goes down.
Yeah,
So, and especially if you have severe PTSD and stress and anxiety from this legal abuse that you're going through, you're gonna be at a lower level. And I
yeah,
remembered what the question, what I was going to say. A lot of the time, what happens with the child protective agencies is they get so many complaints, they finally just want to shut this parent up, and they'll find fault somewhere, something that they can claim. And this isn't okay. Though I've got clients who've been falsely accused, then this, of course, now the prosecutors are involved and they want them to take a plea. And I said, no, you don't take a plea for something you didn't do, especially if it's a felony charge. That's just not okay. The problem is most of them have no money to fight in court. So they end up with a pro bono attorney who isn't going to do their job, and the courts won't allow them to be without an attorney. It's just in some states real mess.
But
yeah.
I'm going to make this statement before Kevin says anything: is the only way they get a pro bono attorney in domestic relations is if it's a social services case.
That's correct in
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas. And that's what I was going to say earlier when I mentioned that I get brought in about halfway through a case in juvenile court. It's usually because they feel like their appointed attorney's not doing enough for them. And it's just kind of going along with the party line. So that's a lot of times when I'm brought in.
Yeah, and the majority of the attorneys I get contacted about from parents and involved in those cases aren't domestic relations court attorneys. They're tax attorneys. They're probate attorneys. They're
Mhm.
arbitrators or whatever. And I'm like, so why are we assigning these people to handle these sort of cases when the children aren't involved? Shouldn't we be giving them attorneys with experience in domestic relations?
How about psychiatrists or rather psychologists trained in it? Attorneys aren't really trained in mental health, and we're dealing with mental health. That's why, okay, I kind of believe that even if you're dealing with a narcissist, mediation, 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 even if it's you mediating and them just being paid in the butt, it's less toxic on the child than going back and forth to court. I have a client who, very wealthy family, could have been in court all day long with the things that are going on. The child fared so much better when there was nothing but mediation, and then, the court orders from that mediation. And if the other parent wasn't complying, that parent can wait till after the child's out of school, whatever, to deal with it. But otherwise, if you're back and forth in court, as much as you can avoid it, better. And if you can get orders made while in mediation, better than fighting
I
in
agree.
court.
Yeah, I agree. If you can mediate and get something done in mediation, it's always much better.
Even
That's
if the
true.
other parent doesn't comply with the mediation's court orders, at least there was mediation and something was attempted. And, so look, if they're withholding the kids still, well, that's now you've mediated this out. Now the mediators can maybe step in a little bit in a different way, notify the judge, hey, Your Honor, you've made the following court order related to our mediation process, but we have a problem with one parent. How do you want us to handle this? I mean, and keep it kind of from being this huge whirlwind that takes months and years to go through the courts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
but even I know for South Carolina, even in mediation, because you're required 3 hours of mediation in South Carolina, the parents really don't mediate. It's the attorneys that mediate everything in
well,
South
that's why
Carolina.
you don't do an attorney. You have to do a
Well,
therapist, or you do a team. To be honest, it should be a team.
those are not allowed in mediation, in
Well,
South
that's what's
Carolina.
got to get
Yeah,
changed. Like many things, hence why I'm mentioning mediation. It's one of the many things that we need to really change, that the parents are forced, not 3 times. 3 times means dick squat, basically. It doesn't mean anything. We need at least a dozen times, once a month for a good year. You really attempt to mediate, because eventually it may wear itself down to where you're able to mediate. But at least the children have had a chance of things on being not dragged through so much. Yes, I get it. If one parent is withholding, that then the mediators need to step in with the judges, or the team
okay.
does.
Kevin, let me ask you this: in Arkansas, and in your experience, do judges listen to the voices of the children in the courtrooms, or
Good
which
question.
parent they want to be with?
Yes. And the older they are, the more weight they will give to it, to
Hmm.
what the child's preference is. But yes, they will listen.
This is where the judges aren't trained properly. The human brain does not stop growing till age 25. It does not stop maturing to age 35. It is why our federal government does not allow children to vote till they're 18, drink or smoke till they're 21, or rent a car till they're 25. How is it that these major life safety things require you being old enough, but deciding where you're going to live, a momentous decision that should change your whole entire life permanently, is allowed?
Well, it's their preference and it's one factor, and the judges will listen. But if a 5 year
Ah,
old
this
is or
that's
six
different.
year old is saying what they want to do, I mean, judges are the one judges I deal with are pretty adept enough to know that a 5 or 6 year, or even a lot of children, the next day they may have a totally different opinion, and
Yeah, I mean
so
they're
that's
children.
when you've got an
Yeah.
ad litem involved or other factors involved. But yeah, they will listen to them. They will. But
Okay.
some
I can't
children,
tell
let me
you.
tell you, they come across very credible, and you can tell they're being genuine with what they have to say, and that can be pretty impactful.
Yep. I mean, I get that. And don't get me wrong. I also like the fact the judge will listen doesn't mean he's accepting that that's going to be definitive. But there's been quite a few children who have made these decisions at an age when they shouldn't have, and now are turning around and saying, I lied. That didn't happen, or I always wanted to, or now I see what's really going on. And these kids have had to make a really adult decision that affected them psychologically. Now they feel guilt in many cases.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Kevin, let me ask you this, and we're going back to the legal aspect. Prior to the 50-50 joint custody resolution in Arkansas, were custodies more awarded more to moms in Arkansas, or were they?
Yes.
And why do you think that was? I mean, do you think that went back to the atomic family model that judges still had in
Yes.
their head?
What I was saying earlier. Yeah, I think that, yes, I think it was just ingrained and it's easy. The judges usually like to try to take the smoothest road they can, and usually the mom was the more nurturing, caretaking parent. That's just kind of how it worked. And dad was the breadwinner, and it was that way for decades until I mean that model has been gone for a long time, but
Yeah.
not out of the minds of the judges. And so I think that yes, before that it was usually the mom.
Okay. Yeah, because when I started research in 2017, when I first got involved in the subject matter, I started pulling up. I don't like using the nomenclatures mom, dad. I always use nomenclatures parent because that's what we're actually talking about. We're talking about children and their parents. It doesn't make a difference if you're the mom or the dad, in my opinion. You're the parent.
Right.
Uh, yeah, but I started researching and noticed all these different research papers had so many dads, so many moms. I'm like, what do you think that kind of blurs the lines for judges sometimes? The mom and dad aspect in these domestic relations courts?
You mean that the mom is usually the one that would prevail in the past, or?
Yeah.
Somewhat, but I think most judges, especially in Arkansas, when that new law came in,
Hmm.
they immediately jumped on the joint custody bandwagon, as far as I could see. And they would be like, "Well, I've got this law here that I've got to go by." I mean, the number one thing a judge does not want is to be overturned on appeal. And
Hmm.
so I think they knew immediately that was a huge shift in family law, in divorce and custody situations when that came in.
So
So
this law, this 50-50 presumption basically changed the whole landscape of your guys' judicial system in domestic
a-
relations courts.
absolutely it did. And you would think your immediate thought is, well, I bet that really cut down on litigation over those issues and going to court, but it really didn't. On some cases it did, but some cases it didn't. And now you've got 50-50. Well, just because there wasn't domestic violence going on and we now have 50-50 doesn't mean that that other parent should have had 50-50, and maybe necessarily that they really wanted it. Maybe they wanted it out of spite against their ex or whatever. Now you're 2 years down the road and we're seeing modifications. Well, he got 50-50 and he doesn't even get them 50% of the time. I've got to go back and change it. So that does happen sometimes.
Okay. Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean, and it shouldn't. Oh, sorry.
I think people misconcept the term 50-50 is you're never going to get a true 50-50 custody no matter what you try to do. I think parents just have this image, this dream image in their head when it comes to stuff like that. I think 20 states now have this 50-50 joint custody thing going
Mhm.
on in the United States. Some states are still not but wanting to back it because they feel it's going to just cause more problems, like you said. Uh, so,
Yeah.
Joni, go ahead.
Yes. I was going to say,
Now I've got about 2 more minutes.
okay. 50-50, to be honest, I mean, it's the standard. It should be the standard, obvious minus domestic violence. And it doesn't, if the person, you have 50-50 shared custody, but if the visitation, or excuse me, the parenting time works out 60-40, 70-25, down the road it'll shift again. The point is that the kids have a healthy relationship with both parents.
Yes.
Okay. So, Kevin, you only got about a minute left. So let me ask you this straight out. Do you believe, as an attorney practicing in Arkansas, that parental alienation is criminal?
Is criminal?
Yes.
Well, I'll answer it this way. I don't think parental alienation is, oh, that's parental alienation. This is not. I think there's a scale. I always use a scale of
Mhm.
about 0 to 10, with one being minor parental alienation and 10 being maximum. I think it gets to a certain level. Yes, it could be criminal. You're
I like that
interfering,
answer.
you're harming a child, and you're interfering with another parent's time with their child and their relationship with their child. So I think it gets to a certain level. Yeah, I think it should be.
I like that answer because I
So
asked
do
that of
I.
just about everybody I've ever interviewed at the end, and most of them will immediately say yes. But
Hmm.
like you just said, there are different grades of alienation going on, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially in the beginning of a divorce, because most parents, that's why you're getting divorced, are a little bit angry with each other for whatever reason.
right.
And so there might be a little alienation or anger comments going back and forth. But eventually, when that subsides, it goes away. It's the ones where they just keep going and escalating. And
And
the
we see
worst,
that.
yeah.
Joni, you and I have been doing this long enough. We see that where they start off at a 1 or 2, or they'll start off at a 1, 2, or 3, or maybe in a 4 level, and they don't get what they're wanting. So then they start escalating even more. So those people that are consistent and active alienators, and it gets to that level, yeah, I think there should be some kind of
And I
criminal.
So
think a
Kev,
10 is when they murder their other parent.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
unfortunately, and I've had that too. So
Yep. And
So
there was
Kev,
just another recent one.
yeah.
so Kevin, let me ask you this in closing here because I know you got to go here in a second. Um, in your advice, what is the best way for other attorneys or pro se litigants to handle the issue of PA in court?
Say you broke up a little bit. Say that again.
In your professional opinion, as a practicing attorney in Arkansas, what is your advice on other professionals in other states and pro se litigants to handle parental alienation in a domestic relations court?
It's going to be hard for a pro se litigant, especially if there's an attorney on the other side. Um, Gosh, I know this isn't a good answer. You really need to get an attorney that knows how to handle parental alienation cases. Joni can probably tell you too. I mean, getting an
Or
attorney
you
that
have to
doesn't
become
know
an
how to handle
attorney.
these cases is so harmful, because especially if the other attorney on the other side knows how to handle these cases, you're just going to be running in circles the whole time, and you're not going to win your case. Pro se litigants, just there's a lot of research out there, um, and articles on the effects of parental alienation, how it's handled in courts. There's materials out there. Um, you just have
So
to
You have
basically,
educate
just
yourself on it and how
educate
to handle it.
yourself.
That's
right.
all
You
you
have
can
to
do.
educate. You literally have to become an attorney,
Yeah.
you know? And many parents are in that position. I do know some parents who have pro se have won their cases, but they were methodical, very organized,
Mhm.
spoke the facts, not the emotions.
You have a judge that does not know either one of you that is going to sit there and listen to this case. The biggest thing I guess I could tell to a pro se litigant is you've got to make sure your story is coherent and succinct, and that you've got evidence to back it up, and tell
You
it
know,
beginning
I
to end and in a clear way. How that's what you've got to do.
I think it would be lovely to have Kevin back on, maybe to do that a talk to parents about how to be pro se. That would be
I
an
think that'd be
interesting.
great. Maybe we can do it after September. Are you going to Toronto?
Yes, I is.
I'll be in Toronto, so I'll see that. I think it'd be good to do it after that, because I think Ashish or somebody else is well, there's 2 or 3 topics on litigation and how to handle cases. So
Yep,
Yeah, we can schedule that. That's not a problem.
absolutely.
yeah,
All right. It
we're
was
gonna get some good.
absolutely a pleasure, Kevin.
Hey, same here, Johnny. It's been a while. It's good to talk to you again. All right, we'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, so Kevin actually gave a lot of good information. I love the way he answered my question on is parental alienation criminal? Because you know
So do I.
yourself, yeah, everyone we've asked, they immediately say yes. But no one talks about at what point does it become criminal?
No one also talks about the fact that somebody who is doing this is also mentally ill. So this has to be, we just watched something, in fact, my husband and I, and it's from Barney Mill, no, from not Barney Miller, Barnes. Oh, I'll tell you the name in a second. It's a very old show from like the 70s or 80s.
And this episode was about a mother and father who divorced. The mother moves the child, gets sole custody, moves the child because the father apparently isn't stable. There are some mental health issues. He then attempts to kidnap the kid. They get the child back, obviously, but
Barnaby
instead of,
Jones.
thank you, Barnaby Jones. But instead of them throwing him in jail, they help him to understand that he has a mental health situation. He needs to be in therapy. They don't try to lock him up. They try, and they hope that the ending is the mother says, well, I'm hoping that he can get better so he can have a relationship. And we can, because I'm going to bring my son to see him. That is important because alienators, on the whole, are not evil, horrible people who are out to rule the world. No, they're hurt, mentally ill people who are not adjusted to life, not in reality with life and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Their upbringing, their nurture affected their nature.